Right now, while you are sitting here watching this, something is happening inside your body that your doctor has almost certainly never explained to you. Your blood pressure medication, the one you swallow every single morning without question, the one you have been told is keeping you safe. That medication may be doing something to your heart, your energy, and your ability to move through your own life that nobody warned you about. A 2021 analysis published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society, looking at over 12,000 adults aged 65 and older, found that nearly 47% of seniors prescribed blood pressure medication were on the wrong type for their specific cardiovascular profile, not a slightly suboptimal choice, the wrong type. Think about what that number means. Nearly half of the people watching this right now may be taking a medication that is creating problems, while they assume it is solving them. Now, here is what I need you to stay for, because I am not here to scare you out of your medication. I am here to give you something your last 3 appointments probably did not. I am going to walk you through the 2 most commonly prescribed blood pressure drugs for seniors over 65, amlodipine and metoprolol, explain exactly how each one works inside an aging body, and tell you the questions that will change the conversation you have with your physician forever. The difference between these 2 drugs is not small. In some cases, it is the difference between thriving and barely getting through the day. Type the word blood in the comments right now. Just that one word. It tells me you are here and paying attention, and it helps me understand who is watching so I can keep making content like this. Now, before I go any further, let me say something clearly. Everything I share today is based on published clinical research and the kind of experience that comes from years inside hospital systems, watching what happens to patients whose medication decisions were never revisited. This is educational information. It does not replace a conversation with your physician, but it will give you the tools to have a much better one. Here is what I have seen. I have watched people in their late 60s and 70s slowly disappear into their recliners, not because of their disease, because of their medication. They stopped walking, they stopped cooking, they handed their car keys to their children, and when their family asked the doctor about it, the answer was, well, that is just aging. It was not aging, and I want you to understand why. To do that, I need you to understand something that most 7-minute appointments never get to, and that is this. Your body at 65 or 70 is not simply an older version of your body at 45. It has undergone specific physiological changes that make certain medications behave completely differently than they did decades ago. And if your prescription was written years ago and never updated with that reality in mind, you may be carrying more risk than you know. Let me walk you through this step by step. After the age of 60, 2 major changes happen inside your cardiovascular system that matter enormously for this conversation. First, your artery walls stiffen, not slightly, significantly. The elastic protein called elastin, think of it like the rubber in a garden hose that lets it stretch and bounce back, begins to break down. What remains is a vessel that is harder, less flexible, less able to absorb the pressure of each heartbeat. This is the reason systolic pressure, the top number in your blood pressure reading, becomes so difficult to control as the body ages, and it is the number most directly tied to stroke, kidney damage, and cognitive decline. Second, your liver slows down. Specifically, the enzymes inside your liver that break down medications become less efficient. This means drugs stay in your system longer. They reach higher concentrations. A dose that was perfectly calibrated for you at 58 can quietly become excessive at 73 without anyone adjusting it. Not because your doctor made a mistake, because the system does not automatically trigger a medication review when your body changes. Now, with that foundation in place, let me introduce you to Joseph. Joseph is 79 years old, a retired high school football coach from Georgia, spent 32 years on the sidelines, building discipline in young men, running practices in July heat, staying on his feet for hours every day. When he retired at 67, he was still walking 4 miles every morning before the rest of the neighborhood woke up. His family called him unstoppable. But about 3 years into his retirement, something shifted. His daughter, a physical therapist, started noticing that her father was sitting down during family dinners before the meal was even finished. He stopped going to the hardware store on Saturday mornings. He told his grandchildren he was too tired to throw a football in the yard. His resting heart rate, when she finally convinced him to check it, was 44 beats per minute. His cardiologist said everything looked fine on paper. Joseph's daughter did not accept that answer, and I want to tell you what she found. But first, I need to explain the mechanism behind what was happening to him, because without that, the rest of this will not land the way it should. Now, let me start with amlodipine, because this is the medication that most seniors are introduced to first, and understanding how it works is the foundation of this entire comparison. Amlodipine belongs to a class of drugs called calcium channel blockers. Now, that term sounds complicated, but the underlying idea is actually quite elegant. Here's what I need you to picture. Think of your artery walls like the walls of a long corridor. When calcium flows into the muscle cells lining that corridor, those cells contract. They squeeze. The corridor narrows. Blood has to push harder to move through. That squeezing is blood pressure. What amlodipine does is block a portion of that calcium from entering those cells. The walls stop squeezing as hard. The corridor stays wider. Blood flows through with less resistance. Pressure drops. Now, here is why this mechanism is particularly relevant for seniors. Remember what I said about arterial stiffness. When your vessels have already lost much of their natural flexibility, a drug that directly targets the muscle tension in those walls addresses the problem at its source. It works on the architecture that aging has already changed. This is why amlodipine is consistently listed as a first-line option in guidelines specifically for older adults with straightforward high blood pressure. A 2019 meta-analysis published in Hypertension, looking at data from more than 22,000 patients, found that calcium channel blockers like amlodipine reduce stroke risk by approximately 38% in adults over 65 with isolated systolic hypertension. That is a significant number, and it is one of the reasons this class of medication has strong evidence behind it for this specific population. But here is the critical dosing detail that almost nobody explains. In younger adults, physicians often begin amlodipine at 5 milligrams once daily. For seniors, the correct starting point is lower, 2.5 milligrams. This is not overcaution. This reflects the physiological reality that your liver processes this drug more slowly, your blood vessels are more responsive to pressure changes, and your risk of a dangerous blood pressure drop when you stand up suddenly is meaningfully higher than it was 20 years ago. The dose can be increased gradually, typically every 10 to 14 days, up to a maximum of 10 milligrams. But each step should only happen if your body is tolerating the current dose comfortably. Now, before I go any further, if this information is already giving you language you did not have before, hit like on this video right now. It costs you nothing, but it tells the algorithm that this kind of careful, thorough health information deserves to reach more people who need it. Let me now turn to metoprolol, because this drug works through an entirely different pathway, and understanding that difference is what separates someone who passively takes a pill from someone who is an active participant in their own care. Metoprolol is a beta blocker. Unlike amlodipine, which targets the artery walls, metoprolol goes directly to the heart. Your heart has receptors, called beta-1 receptors, that respond to adrenaline. Every time you experience stress, exertion, or even just the act of standing up from a chair, adrenaline surges through your system. Those receptors receive that signal and tell your heart to beat faster and harder. It is the body's throttle system. Metoprolol blocks those receptors. The heart slows down. Each beat becomes less forceful. Because the heart is working with less intensity, the pressure it creates inside your vessels decreases. Blood pressure goes down. For seniors who have already experienced a heart attack, who are managing diagnosed heart failure, or who are living with a documented cardiac arrhythmia, this protective effect on the heart muscle is not just beneficial, it is sometimes life-saving. Metoprolol reduces the oxygen demand on a heart that is already under strain. In those specific clinical situations, it functions not merely as a blood pressure medication, but as cardiac armor. That distinction matters enormously, and it is the first key to understanding whether this drug belongs in your daily routine. Now let me take you back to Joseph. His daughter, the physical therapist, brought her concern to a new cardiologist who agreed to do a full medication review. What she found surprised her. Joseph had been placed on metoprolol 6 years earlier after a brief episode of an irregular heart rhythm. That episode resolved. His heart function had been thoroughly reevaluated twice since then and was confirmed to be normal, but the metoprolol prescription had simply continued. No one had revisited whether the original reason for starting it still applied. His resting heart rate at 44 beats per minute was not a coincidence. It was a pharmacological effect. His medication was doing exactly what it was designed to do. The problem was that his heart no longer needed that level of suppression. Picture Joseph sitting across the table from his new cardiologist. He said, "I thought I was just getting old." He thought the fatigue was his body shutting down. He did not know it was his medication. That moment is why I make these videos. Now let me give you the honest side-by-side picture, because this is where the conversation gets personal, and where most videos leave you hanging with incomplete information. Amlodipine and metoprolol have completely different side effect profiles. And for seniors, those differences are not academic. They show up in your daily life in ways that can quietly steal years of quality from you. The most frequently reported side effect of amlodipine in seniors is peripheral edema, swelling in the ankles and feet. Here is why it happens. Amlodipine relaxes the walls of your arteries, but it does not affect your veins with the same intensity. This creates a mismatch. Blood rushes into your lower extremities more easily, but the return trip back up to your heart through the veins is not proportionally improved. Fluid accumulates. Gravity does its work. By evening, your ankles may look and feel like they belong to someone else. Now I need to be clear about something. Ankle swelling from amlodipine is not a sign that your kidneys are failing or that your heart is weakening. It is a mechanical consequence of how the drug works. And this matters enormously for seniors, swelling in your feet and ankles affects your balance. It affects the fit of your shoes. It affects your confidence walking on uneven surfaces. For someone who is already managing balance concerns or a previous fall, this is not a trivial side effect. It is a safety issue. Some patients on amlodipine also experience flushing in the face or neck, a sensation of warmth or redness, especially after standing. Others notice mild palpitations, a brief fluttering sensation that passes quickly but can feel alarming if you do not know to expect it. Headaches are reported in roughly 1 in 10 patients, typically during the first 2 to 4 weeks as the body adjusts. The good news about most amlodipine side effects is that they are dose dependent. Lower dose often means less swelling, less flushing, fewer headaches, which is exactly why that conservative starting dose of 2.5 milligrams is so important for seniors. Now, metoprolol, the side effect picture here is fundamentally different. Fatigue is the most commonly reported complaint, and I do not mean the mild tiredness you might associate with a long day. I mean a deep, pervasive heaviness that seeps into everything. Patients describe it as feeling like they are moving through water, like their motivation has been turned down at the source. Joseph described it as feeling like someone had quietly removed the battery from his life. This fatigue happens because metoprolol does not only block beta receptors in the heart, it also affects beta receptors in skeletal muscle, in the brain, in the metabolic pathways that regulate energy production. The cardiovascular benefit comes with a systemic cost. For a 79-year-old man who spent 30 years coaching athletes, that cost landed on him in a way no one ever warned him about. Beyond fatigue, metoprolol can slow the heart rate to levels that cause lightheadedness, dizziness, or fainting, particularly when standing up quickly from a seated or lying position. In seniors, this is not just uncomfortable, it is a fall risk. And falls in people over 65 carry consequences that no blood pressure medication should be allowed to create. There is one more side effect of metoprolol that I need to address specifically for seniors with any history of breathing difficulties. Metoprolol, even in its more selective formulations, can constrict the airways in patients with COPD, emphysema, or asthma, not dramatically in most cases, but enough to reduce exercise tolerance to create a subtle sense of breathlessness on exertion to make the stairs feel harder than they should. If you are on metoprolol and you have noticed that breathing during mild activity feels different than it used to, this connection deserves a conversation with your physician. And now I need to talk about something that I believe is the most underappreciated risk in senior medication management today, something that turns a safe drug into a dangerous one without any single prescription being wrong. The average adult over 65 takes 4 or more prescription medications daily. Many take 6 or 8, some take 10. Each one was prescribed individually, often by different physicians in different systems. Each one was reviewed in isolation. But inside your body, these drugs do not stay isolated. They share metabolic pathways. They compete for the same enzymes. They interact in ways that no individual prescription review can fully capture. Here is what I need you to understand about amlodipine specifically. Amlodipine is broken down in your liver by an enzyme called CYP3A4. This same enzyme is responsible for metabolizing dozens of other commonly prescribed medications, certain antibiotics, azithromycin, clarithromycin, antifungal medications, some anticonvulsants, and something that surprises nearly every patient when they first hear it: grapefruit juice. Yes, grapefruit juice, not grapefruit flavored products, actual grapefruit juice. Grapefruit contains compounds called furanocoumarins that inhibit the CYP3A4 enzyme. When that enzyme is blocked, amlodipine cannot be broken down at its normal rate. It accumulates in your bloodstream. Blood levels rise higher than intended. The result is amplified side effects, more ankle swelling, more dizziness, a greater risk of an unsafe drop in blood pressure when you stand up, all from a glass of juice at breakfast that nobody thought to ask about. This is not rare. This is not obscure. This is the kind of interaction that falls through the cracks of a system where no one is looking at your complete picture. Metoprolol carries its own interaction risks. When combined with digoxin, a heart rhythm medication used by many seniors with atrial fibrillation, the combined effect on heart rate can be profound. Both drugs independently slow the heart. Together, the slowing can become excessive. Heart rate can drop into ranges that cause fainting, confusion, or worse. If you are taking both of these medications, that combination deserves explicit monitoring and regular heart rate review. Metoprolol also interacts with several antidepressants commonly prescribed to older adults, particularly in the SSRI and SNRI classes. The interaction can increase metoprolol blood levels, intensifying its effects beyond what the dose alone would suggest. Fatigue worsens, heart rate slows further, and because both the antidepressant and the cardiac medication were prescribed for legitimate reasons by physicians who each reviewed their own prescription appropriately, the combined effect remains invisible unless someone looks at the full picture. I need to be direct with you. These interactions are not unusual edge cases. They are happening right now in millions of households where seniors are taking multiple medications that were never reviewed as a system. Now, I have covered a lot of ground with you here. Let me take a moment to check in with you. If this is making sense, if this is giving you a framework you did not have before, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Tell me what medication you are currently on and how long you have been taking it. I read every single comment on this channel, and your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to see today. Let me come back to Joseph one more time, because this is where his story takes a turn. After his new cardiologist reviewed his complete history, her assessment was straightforward. The original reason for starting metoprolol no longer existed. His heart rhythm had been consistently normal for more than 4 years. His heart function was good. His quality of life, meanwhile, had quietly collapsed under the weight of a medication he no longer needed for its original purpose. The transition needed to be handled carefully. This is critical, and I want to emphasize it directly. Metoprolol cannot be stopped suddenly. If you are taking this medication, you must never discontinue it abruptly without medical supervision. Stopping it suddenly can trigger a dangerous rebound effect. Your heart, which has been suppressed by the drug, surges. Heart rate spikes. Blood pressure rises sharply. In some cases, this rebound can precipitate chest pain, a cardiac event, or worse. Joseph's physician managed a slow, supervised taper. Over 8 weeks, his dose was gradually reduced. Midway through that process, they introduced amlodipine at 2.5 milligrams to ensure his blood pressure remained controlled throughout the transition. On day 4 of week 3, Joseph messaged his daughter. She told me about it later. He said, "I walked to the end of the street this morning. First time in 2 years." That sentence, that single message, that is what proper medication review can do. Now let me walk you through what the clinical guidelines actually say, because I believe you deserve to know not just the anecdotes, but the institutional consensus that informs how physicians are supposed to make these decisions. The American College of Cardiology and the American Heart Association publish joint guidelines that most cardiologists follow. The European Society of Cardiology publishes its own. Harvard Medical School and major academic medical centers teach from these frameworks. And on the question of first-line blood pressure treatment in seniors, these guidelines are unusually consistent. For adults over 65 with straightforward high blood pressure, meaning high pressure without an underlying cardiac condition that requires specific heart protection. Calcium channel blockers like amlodipine are consistently recommended as a preferred first-line agent. The evidence for stroke reduction, the mechanism of action that addresses arterial stiffness directly, and the relative tolerability profile all support this positioning. Now here is a number that surprised me when I first encountered it in the clinical literature. A 2022 review published in JAMA Internal Medicine, analyzing prescribing patterns across three major health systems, found that approximately 31% of seniors who were initially placed on a beta blocker for uncomplicated hypertension had no documented cardiac indication that would justify that choice according to current guidelines. 31%, nearly 1 in 3. These were people whose blood pressure was the primary concern. No heart attack history, no documented heart failure, no arrhythmia that required ongoing beta blockade. But they were on metoprolol, and many of them had been on it for years. Now, I am not telling you this to undermine confidence in the medical system. I am telling you this because the system, as it currently functions, operates under enormous time pressure. A physician managing a full panel of patients with complex needs, navigating insurance requirements, documenting everything in electronic records, does not always have the bandwidth to revisit a prescription that appears to be working in the narrow sense that blood pressure numbers are controlled. Your job, and this is the part I want you to really hear, is to bring questions that prompt that revisit. Here is the distinction that should guide everything. Amlodipine is the stronger choice when your primary problem is high blood pressure caused by aging arteries that have lost their flexibility, when your blood pressure numbers are driven by systolic elevation, when you do not have a current cardiac condition that requires specific heart protection beyond pressure control, and when fatigue or reduced exercise capacity is already affecting your quality of life. Metoprolol is the stronger choice when your heart has experienced documented damage from a heart attack, when you are managing active heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, when you have a diagnosed arrhythmia, particularly atrial fibrillation, where rate control is the primary goal, or when your cardiologist has identified a specific reason your heart muscle needs the load-reducing effect that beta blockade provides. The question is not which drug is better. The question is which drug matches why your blood pressure needs treatment. Here is something important that most people do not know. For seniors who genuinely need both blood pressure control and heart protection, a combination approach is often more effective than either drug alone: amlodipine for the vessel level pressure reduction, a low-dose beta blocker for the cardiac protection, each doing what it does best, together creating a lower total dose burden and often fewer side effects than maximizing either drug alone. This is the conversation your cardiologist is equipped to have, but only if you ask for it with the right language. Let me give you the exact questions I want you to bring to your next appointment. Write these down. Save them on your phone. These are not confrontational questions. They are the questions of an informed patient who is taking ownership of their own health. Question 1. Based on my current cardiovascular profile, my specific conditions, my age, and how my blood pressure pattern has changed over time, is my current medication the most appropriate first-line choice for someone in my situation today? Question 2. When was the last time my complete medication list was reviewed for interactions? Not just my heart medications, everything I take, including over-the-counter supplements and vitamins. Question 3. What specific side effects should I be monitoring for at my current dose? And what is the threshold at which I should call you rather than wait for my next scheduled appointment? Question 4. What is my target blood pressure range? And has that target been calibrated for my age? Because research shows that very aggressive lowering can sometimes create more risk than benefit in adults over 70. Question 5. Is there any reason to consider a gradual reassessment of my current dose, not stopping the medication, but potentially adjusting it based on how well my blood pressure has been controlled over the past year? These 5 questions will change the quality of your next appointment. Now, I want to be direct with you about what to expect if a medication adjustment is ever part of your care plan, because the expectation setting piece is something that almost nobody does, and it is the reason many people abandon a transition before it has had the chance to work. Here is the honest picture. If you transition from metoprolol to amlodipine under medical supervision, week 1 will feel uncertain. Your body has been accustomed to a heart rate that was pharmacologically slowed. As that suppression lifts, you may notice that your heart feels more present in your chest. Your pulse may seem faster than you are used to, even if it is still within a completely normal range. This is not a warning sign. It is your cardiovascular system finding its natural rhythm again. By week 2, most patients report that the initial adjustment sensations have faded. Some notice that their energy levels have begun to shift. Not dramatically yet, but a baseline that feels less like resistance and more like possibility. Week 3 is when I typically hear from patients, because week 3 is when the change in energy becomes undeniable, not the energy of a 25-year-old, but the energy of themselves before the medication began its slow drain. The energy to walk to the end of the street, to stay at the dinner table without needing to sit down, to throw a football with a grandchild. The ankle swelling from amlodipine may begin in the first few weeks. For most patients, it is manageable. Elevating your legs in the evening, wearing comfortable, well-fitting shoes, staying mobile rather than sitting for long periods. These simple adjustments reduce the pooling effect significantly. If the swelling becomes problematic, that is a conversation for your physician, not a reason to abandon the medication without guidance. Here is the one thing I need you to commit to. Do not make any changes without your doctor's involvement, not because the information I am sharing is uncertain, because the transition itself requires monitoring, because stopping metoprolol abruptly without supervision carries real cardiac risk, because starting amlodipine without baseline blood pressure data makes it impossible to calibrate the right dose. The value of this information is not that it allows you to manage your medication alone. The value is that it allows you to walk into your appointment as a partner in your own care. Now, there is one more layer to this story that I have not addressed yet, and it is the one that I believe is most important for this conversation. Most seniors over 65 are not taking one blood pressure medication. According to a 2023 report from the National Institute on Aging, 63% of adults over 65 with diagnosed hypertension are on 2 or more antihypertensive agents. Some are on 3. The interaction landscape at that point is not just complex. It is genuinely difficult to manage without systematic review. Here's what I want you to take from that number. If you are on multiple medications and you have not had a dedicated medication reconciliation appointment in the past 12 months, that is a gap in your care, not a judgment, not a crisis, but a gap. A pharmacist who specializes in geriatric medications, or a physician who will sit with your complete medication list and evaluate the interactions systematically, can find things that routine appointments miss. Some hospitals and clinic networks now offer dedicated medication review appointments for older adults, specifically for this purpose. If your current provider does not offer this, you have the right to ask for a referral. You have the right to request that your complete medication list be reviewed before any new prescription is added. And you have the right to say, based on what I have learned, I would like to discuss whether my current blood pressure medication is still the most appropriate choice for me today. That sentence is your opening. Use it. Let me bring Joseph's story home. 8 weeks after his supervised transition was complete, Joseph showed up at his daughter's house on a Sunday morning carrying a bag of groceries from the store down the road. He had walked there, not driven, walked. Round trip was just over a mile. His daughter told me she stood in the doorway and did not say anything for a moment. She said she was afraid to move because she did not want to disturb whatever was happening. His morning heart rate was now 61 beats per minute, a full 17 beats per minute higher than it had been on metoprolol, squarely in the normal resting range for a healthy adult. His energy, in his own words, had come back in a way that felt like waking up from a long dream that he did not know he was having. His ankle swelling from amlodipine was mild. He wore slightly looser shoes in the evening. He elevated his legs when watching television, a small inconvenience that he described as completely worth it. 3 months later, his cardiologist's note documented something I want to share with you exactly as Joseph described it. He said, "I coached 32 years of athletes. I spent my whole career telling young men that showing up and paying attention is what separates the ones who improve from the ones who stay stuck. I should have been paying attention to my own body for the last 2 years, but nobody told me there was something worth paying attention to. Nobody told him. That is the gap this video exists to close. Now, Joseph's results were on the favorable end of what I typically see with this kind of transition. Your body, your baseline, your specific combination of conditions will determine your own timeline. Some patients notice energy improvements in week 2. Others take a full 6 to 8 weeks before the difference becomes clear. What matters is not the speed, it is the direction. Let me pull this all together for you, because everything I have shared today ultimately comes down to a framework, a way of thinking about your blood pressure medication that you can carry into every conversation with every provider from this point forward. Amlodipine works primarily on your vessels. It relaxes the muscle tension in your artery walls, widens the channel blood flows through, and reduces the mechanical pressure that stiff aging arteries create. Its most significant side effect is ankle swelling. Its most significant benefit is consistent, well-documented stroke risk reduction in older adults with isolated systolic hypertension. Metoprolol works primarily on your heart. It slows the heart rate, reduces the force of each contraction, and decreases the oxygen demand on cardiac muscle. Its most significant side effects are fatigue and slowed heart rate. Its most significant benefit is cardiac protection in people who have suffered a heart attack, who are managing heart failure, or who have an arrhythmia that requires rate control. The critical question is not which drug is safer in the abstract. The critical question is whether your current medication matches the current reason your blood pressure needs treatment, because those reasons can change. Your cardiovascular profile at 65 is not identical to your profile at 75. A medication that was appropriate when it was written may be a poor fit for the body you are living in today. Now I want to address something that I know is on the minds of a significant number of you watching right now. What if you are on both medications? What if your prescription includes amlodipine plus metoprolol, either as separate tablets or as a combination formulation? This is actually more common than you might think, and for patients with specific cardiovascular profiles, it is clinically appropriate. If you have both the high blood pressure driven by arterial stiffness problem and a cardiac condition that requires heart protection, then using both drugs at conservative doses can address both problems simultaneously while potentially allowing lower doses of each than would be needed using either drug alone. But there are also patients on both medications because amlodipine was added when metoprolol alone was not controlling pressure adequately, without ever addressing whether metoprolol was the right foundation to begin with. If that sounds like it might describe your situation, that is exactly the conversation worth initiating. Here is what I need you to be clear about before you take any next steps. Never stop either of these medications without medical supervision. I want to say that directly and without ambiguity. This is not a legal disclaimer. This is a clinical reality. Stopping metoprolol abruptly can cause your heart rate and blood pressure to rebound dangerously. Stopping amlodipine abruptly can cause a rapid return of elevated pressure. Any change to your medication must happen through your physician with monitoring and with a clear plan. What you can do immediately, starting today, is prepare. Print out the references in the description below this video and bring them to your next appointment. Write down the 5 questions I gave you earlier and bring those too. And when you sit across from your physician, say this. Based on some reading I have done about blood pressure medications in adults my age, I would like to spend a few minutes reviewing whether my current prescription is still the most appropriate fit for my cardiovascular profile today. That one sentence. That is the opening. Now let me spend a few minutes on something I want to make sure you leave here with, because it goes beyond the comparison between these two specific drugs. It applies to every medication you take. The concept is called medication burden, and it is one of the most underaddressed issues in geriatric medicine. Medication burden refers to the cumulative physiological, cognitive, and quality of life cost of taking multiple medications over time. Individual drugs are evaluated for safety and efficacy in isolation, but the human body at 70 or 80 is not experiencing them in isolation. It is managing them together. Each one is processed by the same liver. Each one competes for the same enzymes. Each one contributes to a total load that the body must handle on top of everything else it is managing. Research published in the Annals of Internal Medicine found that seniors taking 5 or more medications daily, a situation experienced by roughly 40% of adults over 65 in the United States, had a measurably higher rate of falls, cognitive impairment, and hospital readmission compared to those on fewer medications. Not because any single drug was dangerous, because the cumulative burden exceeded what aging physiology can gracefully manage. This is not a reason to avoid medication. Medications save lives. Blood pressure control reduces stroke risk. That is real and it matters. But it is a reason to approach every medication in your cabinet as something that belongs there for a current, specific, reviewed reason. Not simply because it was added at some point and no one has revisited whether it still belongs. A framework that geriatric medicine specialists use is called the Beers criteria. Updated regularly by the American Geriatric Society, it identifies medications that carry particular risk for older adults, either because of the drug itself or because of interactions that become more likely as the number of prescriptions increases. I have linked information about this resource in the description below. I encourage you to look at it, not to self-diagnose or self-manage, but to understand what a systematic, age-appropriate medication review looks like, and to bring that understanding to your physician. This is your health, this is your body, and you have every right to be an active participant in the decisions being made about it. Let me close this out by coming back to where this all started. The retired postal worker who nearly collapsed in his kitchen, and Joseph, my retired football coach from Georgia who handed his independence back to a medication that had outlived its purpose. These are not unusual stories. These are not anomalies at the edges of a well-functioning system. They are patterns, patterns that repeat across millions of households where someone is taking a medication they were prescribed years ago, in a body that has changed significantly since then, without the information they need to even know the right questions to ask. You came here today, you stayed for this information, you are doing what both of them wished they had done earlier, and that changes everything. Because here is what I know after years of watching this play out in real lives. The patients who do best are not the ones with the least complicated health histories. They are the ones who show up to their appointments prepared, who know enough about their own medications to ask specific, informed questions, who understand that their physician is a partner in their care, not the sole authority over it. The difference between a medication that is slowly draining your life and one that is actively protecting it often comes down to a single conversation, and you now have what you need to have that conversation. Here's what I want you to do right now. Before you close this video, type the words "I finished" in the comments. Let me know you made it through the whole thing. And then I want you to think of one person in your life, a parent, a spouse, a sibling, a friend who has been on blood pressure medication for years and who you have noticed seems more tired, less energetic, less themselves than they used to be. Share this video with that one person, not to alarm them, to give them what you just gave yourself, a framework, a set of questions, a reason to have a conversation that might be overdue. That share costs you 10 seconds. It might change their next 5 years. Before I go, I want to tell you what is coming in the next video, because it connects directly to everything I covered with you today. There is a specific pattern of side effects that research now links to the most commonly prescribed combination of blood pressure medications in adults over 70. A pattern that mimics the signs of normal aging so closely that neither patients nor their physicians typically recognize it as medication-related until a systematic review reveals it. A 2023 study published in Age and Aging, following over 8,000 seniors for 4 years, found that patients on this specific combination were nearly 2.5 times more likely to report significant reduction in daily activity levels compared to those on alternative regimens. I am going to break down exactly what that combination is, how to identify if it applies to you, and what the evidence shows about safer alternatives. That video goes up next week. Make sure you are subscribed and have the notification bell turned on so you do not miss it. I read every comment, so tell me how you are doing down below. Tell me what medication you are on, how long you have been taking it, and whether any of what I covered today resonates with what you have been experiencing. Your experience might be exactly what someone else in this community needs to read. This is your health, this is your body, and you have the right to understand every decision being made about it. I read every comment, so tell me how you are doing down below. Everything shared in this video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. The case of Joseph represents a composite pattern based on common clinical presentations and published research in geriatric cardiology. Individual results vary significantly. Never stop, reduce, or change any prescription medication without the guidance of your physician. Always consult your personal healthcare provider before making any changes to your treatment plan.